they didn't take an edge until 173. A lot of people thought edge was one of their biggest needs in the draft. But I think we got to come back to Drake Jackson. Like, there's a reason they took him with their first pick last year, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think they expect Drake Jackson to be the guy, and I think they expect him to be the guy that's going to be the starter. You look at what they got out of Samson Ebukam the last 2 years. I think Drake Jackson gives them all of that plus a little bit more. So I like that. And then as far as the player they took at 173, I think they took a really good player here. This is where I thought they were going to go. I thought they were going to go edge around 155. I really liked Viliami Fehoko out of San Jose State. I thought he was going to fall to 155, and the damn Cowboys jumped up and took him like around 120, 130. I think it was somewhere around that area. But, this guy does what the 49ers look for. He doesn't totally fit the system that he was in because they had him played outside linebacker at Georgia. So now being able to put his hand down and actually play defensive end, I think it's gonna help him out. And I think he's gonna be a solid rotational back of the rotation type player.
Yeah, I like taking guys who were like 5-star recruits who like things didn't work out for them in college, but they tested well, and you have a good position coach and you can get them at the end of round 5. Love picks like that. That's what you're looking for in round. I prefer those kind of picks than like, guy who didn't test that well, but has 4 years of experience and is tough and like a coach's son. It's like, nah, man, like you're just a backup. You're a special teamer at best. Give me a guy who has a chance to be special with a good coach and on a good team. And I think that's what Robert Beal Jr. is. And I think that's why I keep coming back and whining and complaining about the offensive line. It's like, Kyle, recognize how good your offensive line coach is. When you first got here, your offensive line coach was not good. It was Tom Benton, as I want to say his name was. He ended up going with Solid of the Jets. Not good. Ever since they brought in Forrester, he's been on the field with the players the last 2 seasons, I want to say. Look what's happened with Banks and Burford and Brendel. Look at Brendel. Now, there was no helping McGlinchey at this. He had some injuries, though. But let's see what happens to McKivitz. Like, I think if you just gave this guy, what Howie Roseman does is he just gets the best athletes, the biggest, fastest, best athletes, and trusts his coaches. Like, what you could do that too, Kyle. Trust your coach.
Yeah, I think you can. You got a guy in Beal here who's going to play with Chris Kocurek. Kocurek does a really good job of getting the guys out. I kind of, our good mutual friend, East Bay Chris, talked a lot during the draft process about Chris Kocurek and his being able to hold play. That's the first thing I put out when they drafted this guy at 173 because Chris was talking about it.
Yeah.
That, they got Chris Kocurek.
That's right.
But I just like the long arms, the quick get off. I think what fits the 49ers. He seems like everybody that's, everything that I've read kind of leads to me to believe that he's going to be decent against the run as well. So as a rotational guy, I like that. And then I know Lynch and Shanahan talked about his ability to make plays in the open field. So that'll help him out on special teams.
I did one mock draft, and my bold choice in the mock draft was taking no edge rushers. Because the way I looked at it is the Niners generally don't draft edge rushers. They took Bosa, they took Pita Tomapinu, and Drake Jackson. And usually what they do is they take former first-round picks a la Cleveland Farrell, who didn't work out, and they put them on like the Chris Kocurek career rehabilitation program. You know what I'm saying? It's like, hey man, are you about to wash out of the league? Do you want to get some money down the line, but not just yet? Why don't you come play for Chris Kocurek, and next year you'll get a contract somewhere else. But now it feels like they're just, why don't we just skip the process and draft someone with actual traits? I think it's smart. Like, don't wait for Cleveland Farrell to bust. Just get Robert Beal. I think it's smart. Or do both.
Yeah, I think it's a good move. I think he fits them, and late enough in the draft where you can take a shot. It's end of the 5th round. You take a shot on this guy, and if he works out, then it's all arrows up and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
right?
Pleasantly surprised by this draft pick. Josh Wyatt says, does seeing the Niners bring in Sam Darnold so they can float trading Lance and commit to a guy with a catastrophic injury and 8 career starts make you miss the stability of Jimmy Garoppolo? Well put. I know why you would say that, but for me, no. My whole thing with the Jimmy thing is once you know a guy is not the guy, as in like the franchise guy, and you have a certain standard that you want, you got to move on. You got to find out what you have in the next guy. And at least with Darnold and Trey and Brock, there's enough mystery in all 3 to keep them around. But once you know that a guy is not the guy, he's got to go. Got to go.
Yeah, well, especially when they got themselves into the contract with Garoppolo early on. I don't think it was a bad contract because when you look at the structure of it in the beginning, I understand all the discussions around that. But you're right. Once they made the decision around 2020 that it wasn't the guy, then
Gotta go.
they kind of stuck around with them for 21, and they were almost got there. And then last year he kind of helped get them there for a little while.
But
And
at what price? They still don't really know what they have in Trey Lance.
well,
You know what I'm saying?
yeah, no, yeah. Well, they would have known if Lance didn't get his ankle broke.
They would have known. And they would have
quarters.
known if they played him their rookie year too.
Yeah, they would have.
They might have.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
just saying, every other
knows?
team that moved on from their quarterback, like the Niners did with Jimmy, just got rid of the guy that year. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't stick around here and imagine Carson Wentz being Jalen Hurts' mentor. Hey, Carson was going to take you under his wing. Carson's going to show you the ways.
It's going to be interesting. I don't know if we have that as a topic here, but we talk about the quarterback position and Trey Lance, and he wasn't ready to play in 21. I'm interested to see. I listening to the draft. I wasn't watching the first round. I was listening to it on the radio, and when the Indianapolis Colts took Anthony Richardson, the guys on ESPN radio said that Shane Steichen just got his next Jalen Hurts. And I about fell out of my chair laughing because there's no way that he might turn out to be Jalen Hurts. He may, but there's Jalen Hurts when Shane Steichen got him was a much better product than Anthony Richardson is joining.
Much more finished product for sure. But what's interesting is what, I agree. Steichen said, we're going to play the guy. The only way you improve is by playing. And that's how I feel. And what was interesting, if you go, we don't have to rehash the past, but 2021, they started off 3-5. And you wonder, like, could you have started off 3-5 with a green Trey Lance, and could he have improved? Because I always felt he's not going to improve on the bench. And some people felt he would, and I don't think he did. I think what we saw, you were there. I think what we saw in training camp last year was a guy who didn't improve on the bench.
I would say that I was one of those who thought that he could improve playing, working on the practice squad, all those types of things. And I thought that we saw that from him in week 17 against Houston. And then we didn't see that during training camp last year and all that kind of stuff. And then go back to 2021. And this is where I'll disagree with, I'm disagreeing with you in that I think they kept trying to figure out a way to get him in there, right? They weren't, the whole thing with, rotating quarterbacks that got shut down really early. Garoppolo goes down against Seattle. That opens the door for Lance. So Lance finishes the second half off against Seattle. He makes a start in Arizona. And I think if he doesn't get injured against Arizona, there's probably a good chance that he continues playing for a couple of weeks. But he injured his knee, and that injured knee puts any kind of plans on the back burner. And it almost seems like after that, by the time he was ready to come back is when they started winning some games, and then they just kind of rolled through. The one question about that whole thing is once you get to week 17 and Jimmy Garoppolo's injured and he goes out there and plays as well as he did against Houston, why don't you stay with it one more week? I know it's a winner take all kind of thing. If you win, if you lose, you're going home kind of deal. But if you truly believed at that point that he was better than Jimmy, then you make the move and you just keep riding him. And so to me, them going back to Jimmy Garoppolo is them not believing that at that point Lance was better than him. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I agree. But I just feel like they kept flip-flopping on what they wanted to do, and they got themselves in a weird position because of the pandemic. If you remember, it was a really weird offseason when they got Trey Lance because the cap went down. When does it ever do that? It always goes up. But that year it went down. And that year I think they were counting on losing a bunch of vets like Juszczyk. They were this close to losing Trent Williams. I think they thought a lot of those vets were going to leave, and then they just fell into their lap because there was no market for them. And then they felt like, well, we got to keep Jimmy. We can't go to Trey. I think they were cool with just, hey, we'll take this guy Trey. We'll let him play, which is the best way for him to improve, even though he's not technically ready because he only threw 300 passes. Let's just do it. And then they got Juice back and Trent back and all. It's like, well, damn, they won't allow us to do that. We can't really do that anymore. And I feel like it was just kind of awkward. And now they're in a really, really weird position because of that. That pandemic really was something that it's almost like it didn't happen. It was 3 years ago. We forget about it, but it really affected things.
Yeah, it did change some things around. So that's actually, that's a good point about it. But
I went down.
I just really do feel like they kept trying to put him in there, and it just wasn't working. And between the injury and You know,
Yeah.
you go back to the like for me, if we go back to day one, he was awesome in training camp in the beginning. They kind of fizzled out in the middle when they tried to put him into the starter, more of the with the starters, and then he hurts his finger. They roll in there. They're kind of going back and forth between him and Garoppolo against the Raiders, and use him a little bit against the Lions. I think after that Lions game is when the players go to Shanahan and say, hey, we don't want to do this back and forth kind of thing. Pick a quarterback and let's roll with it. So they stick with Garoppolo, and then the injury happens against Arizona. I think the injury against Arizona was really the biggest one as far as him not being able to play more his rookie season.
I think it's fair to remember though that so they don't go with Lance, they go with Jimmy. They score 41 week 1, week 2 they score 17. Like week 3 they score 28, week 2 they score 21 and lose, and Jimmy gets hurt. Then Trey plays and gets hurt. By week Jimmy comes back, they score 18 and lose. Like the season was on the brink right there, and they've been playing like crap as a team collectively. They go to Chicago, they win, they come back the next week, they lose to Arizona at home. They're 3-5. Like I think they didn't take off until week 10, and we saw the same thing last year. I just feel like, and then Trey Lance, he played really great week 17 that year. I think it's a little bit that the team as a whole, the offense as a whole, kind of is disjointed in the beginning of the season and gets a rhythm and momentum late. And quarterback suffers from that early and benefits late sometimes.
Yeah, that could be a part of it. That could be a part of it, because I don't think that was there. That happened in 19. I think they were pretty consistent in the beginning of the season offensively.
The defense was sick.
Yeah, obviously.
Defense was sick. Yeah, absolutely. I remember Jimmy having some struggles early on in the year. They also had that win against Carolina where they ran for like 800 yards. They're doing like army plays, triple option. It's crazy. Corey Soto says, Lynch and Kyle, we loved our draft. Niners fans, I like all the picks, but the kicker football community outside of Niner universe, Niners draft suck F. Again, that's what's so interesting. The entire national community says, yeah, that was the worst draft what the Niners did. They also say, yeah, the Niners are going to win the NFC. It's like, okay, you hate their draft, you don't know who their quarterback is, and they're the best team in the NFC? I don't get that. National reporters can't make their mind up.
It's interesting. I think when you look at the quarter, I think the kicker pick drives them down. And then you look at, and then you say, okay, what other starters do they have that they take? They didn't take anybody other than Jair Brown. They didn't really take anybody that was like a, high profile player. So I think that also plays into these rankings that these
good
guys
point. That's a good point. Michael Monahan says, how many wins for Brock to be accepted? Accepted? He's already been accepted.
Yeah, he just needs to have his right arm work.
Yeah, pretty much.